While the NBA has produced countless superstars over the years, none of them, not Wilt or MJ or LeBron, are as universally revered as Bill Russell. A transcendent and transformative talent who anchored the game's most prolific dynasty, eventually becoming the NBA's first black head coach, and more than any other figure in the history of the sport, epitomized the word champion. On the floor, the towering center changed the game, using his size in revolutionary ways and putting up numbers that boggle the mind. As a force on both ends of the court, Russell was the linchpin of the Celtics dynasties of the late 50s and 60s, eventually serving as player coach, and to this day, no player has earned more rings. His accomplishments off the court are no less impressive. Russell was an outspoken activist who ultimately became a civil rights icon, and he continued to fight injustice right up until his death on July 31st, 2022. Ultimately, to distill Russell's life and career to one moment would be an insult to his outsized legacy. So instead, we're highlighting the litany of ways in which Russell altered basketball forever. I need you to imagine this, playing defense in basketball without leaving your feet. Well, that was the standard way before Russell burst onto the scene in 1956. As Russell recounted in his memoir, to play good defense, I was told back then that you had to stay flat-footed at all times to react quickly. When I started to jump to make defensive plays and to block shots, I was initially corrected, but I stuck with it and it paid off. Russell had honed his leaping abilities as a world-ranked high jumper at the University of San Francisco, and standing at 6'10" with a 7'4" wingspan, Russell was then among the league's tallest players, and certainly one of its most athletic. As a rookie, he immediately put that frame to use, along with his jaw-dropping speed and mobility to guard the opposing team's best player night in, night out, no matter if they were a guard, center, or a forward. Look, it is commonplace in the modern NBA to see mobile and agile big men who can both defend guards on the perimeter and protect the rim. But it was Russell in the 50s and 60s who pioneered that trend. As if he were dropped into the NBA from the distant future when the game would be considerably quicker and positionless, Russell could grab a rebound, sprint the length of the floor, and take it to the hoop with defenders essentially helpless. Anthony Davis or Giannis Antetokounmpo do that regularly now, but in 1956, when Russell was doing it, it was a marvel. On top of that, Russell was one of the game's smartest players, turning a playground game into a thinking man's sport by serving as the tactician behind Boston's stalwart defense. And he was, above all, selfless, prioritizing winning over his own numbers, as Kobe Bryant would later explain.
He said, when I played, I could score the ball. I could handle the ball, and I could pass the ball. But it was really important, in order for us to win, I had to look at my teammates and say, okay, there's other players here that do that better. Therefore, I must allow them to do that. And what I do best is defend and rebound. So I'm going to completely focus on that. Let Kuzi handle the ball, right? Let Sams be the shooter, Havlicek be the shooter. And I thought that was a very, very insightful thing that I used in how I was able to go on and win those two championships post-Shaq.
In 2009, the NBA Finals MVP award was renamed after Russell, and shortly after his death in 2022, Russell's number 6 jersey was retired across the league. Those honors were well earned. Russell won his first of 11 NBA titles as a player in his rookie year and helped the Celtics win 8 in a row between 1959 and 1966, winning 5 MVP awards in the process. He played in 21 winner-take-all games through college and the NBA and never lost a single one. In college, he led USF to back-to-back titles and 55 straight victories. As a result of his dominance, the NCAA even widened the free throw lane from 6 feet to 12 feet to inhibit Russell's ability to rebound on offense. And once he graduated, they instituted another rule inspired by the trailblazing big man, basket interference. And 50 plus years after retiring in 1969, he still ranks top 20 in NBA history for winning percentage, winning over 71% of the games he's played in. He ranks second all-time in rebounds in NBA history, behind only longtime rival and friend Wilt Chamberlain, and if blocks and steals were registered when he played, he would have been near the top of those lists too. The craziest part may be that he won his last 2 NBA titles as a player coach, becoming the only player to achieve the feat. When longtime Celtics coach Red Auerbach retired following the 1965-1966 season, he insisted on Russell taking the job. Russell rejected the offer on multiple occasions, but after the two consulted on possible candidates, Russell and Red eventually realized he was the only man for the job. And on April 18, 1966, it was official. Russell became the first black head coach not only in the NBA, but in all of professional sports. At the time, according to Russell himself, he had no idea of the gravity of the decision. It rubbed a lot of Bostonians the wrong way, Russell wrote in his 2009 book. At the time, Boston was a totally segregated city, and I vehemently opposed segregation. However, Russell's bona fides were unquestionable, and no one could second-guess his acumen for the game. Thanks to Russell paving the way, over half, 16 to be specific, of the NBA's current head coaches are non-white heading into the 2022-2023 season. But still, as Russell said, he was taking the job at a pivotal time in American history, during the civil rights movement of the late 1960s. There's no question that Russell, a black man who played professional basketball in the Jim Crow era and himself endured the hypocrisy of black athletes being idolized on the court but marginalized off of it, helped pave the way for the modern athlete to be more vocal about social and political issues. His activism and moral courage defined him just as much as his dominance on the court, and Russell's resolve was tested constantly throughout his career. One such test came in 1961, when the Celtics visited Lexington, Kentucky for an exhibition game against the St. Louis Hawks. There, several black players from the Celtics were denied service at the hotel restaurant where the team was staying. That injustice inspired Russell to protest, and he ultimately organized a boycott, one of the first by a player in the NBA. And while the exhibition showcase proceeded on without him, Russell and the black players from Boston and St. Louis refused, with the Celtics players flying home the same day. When Russell arrived in Boston, he told reporters that he refused to play under those circumstances again. Then, in 1963, Russell joined civil rights leader Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. That same year, Russell showed public support for demonstrations against segregation in Boston schools, addressing the black students who were taking part in the sit-in. And when civil rights leader Medgar Evers was assassinated months later in Jackson, Mississippi, Russell traveled to the Deep South and ran an integrated basketball camp despite receiving multiple death threats in the process. I said that I wasn't scared of the kind of men who come in the dark of night, Russell wrote for Slam magazine in 2020. The fact is, I've never found fear to be useful. That fearlessness continued on as Russell led the Celtics to NBA title after NBA title amid unrelenting racial abuse, even from his home crowd. And on top of his commitment to racial justice, Russell was also a fierce labor champion who fought for equity and helped facilitate solidarity within the NBA. Memorably, before the start of the first televised All-Star game in 1964, Russell and the 19 other All-Stars took a vote to determine whether they should refuse to play in the game until the league agreed to implement a pension plan. The game was delayed 15 minutes as players voted in favor of a strike 11-9 before NBA Commissioner Walter Kennedy caved and recognized the NBA's player union, a groundbreaking victory for the NBPA and sports unions everywhere. In 1967, in his second season as a player-coach for the Celtics, Russell was one of the most vocal attendees at the Cleveland Summit, a meeting of influential black athletes. There, superstars like Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Jim Brown joined together to show solidarity with Muhammad Ali, who had faced an extreme amount of backlash for his refusal to be drafted for the Vietnam War. Throughout all these moments, and numerous other moments in between, Russell served as the NBA's most fearless and outspoken champion for justice. Nowadays, because of the foundation that Russell built, social and political activism is commonplace, not only in the NBA, but in all sports. When the Milwaukee Bucks led a league-wide protest in the NBA's bubble following the shooting of Jacob Blake, an unarmed black man in Wisconsin, Russell tweeted he was proud of the players for doing something similar to what he did all the way back in 1961. And in 2011, President Barack Obama awarded Russell the Medal of Freedom for standing up for the dignity and rights of all men. He wasn't exactly basketball's Jackie Robinson, but Russell saw himself as a successor of sorts and felt responsible for building on the groundwork that Robinson had laid years earlier, breaking baseball's color barrier.
Jackie Robinson was a hero to all of us. But my attitude was that Jackie took us from point A to point B. And I want to go from point B to point C.
When Russell first entered the league, there were only 15 black players in the entire NBA. By the time he retired in 1969, the majority of the league's players were black. And in 2021, black players comprised of over 70% of the NBA. In many ways, that shows the profound impact Russell had on the game. A man who did as much to change it on the court as he did leaving a lasting impact outside of it. A man who always spoke his mind despite death threats, vandals breaking into his house, and his own city treating him like a second-class citizen. A man who is undoubtedly the greatest winner in all of pro sports. There will never be another Bill Russell. Truly a one-of-a-kind revolutionary.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.